So welcome to Dancefair. I think it's already the, what is it, fourth, fifth year that I'm here to talk about in-depth mixing and mastering. And because today we only have 45 minutes, I'm going to start with some tips and tricks, which I just prepared. So I'm going to open up another Logic. First of all, any guys were here last year already? Okay, so it's mixed. So I guess a few things you will remember from last year, but sometimes it's always good, also good to just hear it for another time, so you really know what the idea about a certain trick is. Well, let me first introduce myself a little bit. My name is John Christian, and I'm already producing for like 20 years. And I'm going from Dutch local folk music to dance. And dance is my passion. That's the reason why I do the things that I do. But I also love to sometimes change the whole studio vibe and produce another Gerard Joling track. Which is also nice to do because it's something else and it gets you into producing and recording with instrumentalists like violins or brass or whatever. So it's good for the experience of producing in general. I have my setup here, which is very simple. It's my Mac Pro, the same as which I use in the studio. This is my hard drive. This is my UAD, which I cannot leave at home because I really use a lot of UAD plugins. I really love the sound of it. I think it's the best out there. And some speakers to hear myself, and basically that's it. And I think that should be enough to make some really nice tracks. And what I did is prepare some tricks to give you for your mixing and mastering, but also the way of thinking to approach things in a certain way. And later on I want to switch to a track which I've released together with Tiësto. Today I'm representing Musical Freedom as a label here because I was connected to Musical Freedom and releasing a lot of music there recently, and I think that really helped my career building and stuff. That's the reason why I represent them, and that's also the reason why I'm going to use a collaboration track with Tiësto to show you what we actually did. Also because collaboration is a thing that's really happening a lot, and in this case it's a collaboration with someone who just came into the studio, which you saw the video of, for just a few days, you know, so we had to do a lot through Skype and stuff, and you know, that really was a fun project, but I want to take you into that project a bit later. First of all, we are producing dance music. At least that's what we are talking about today. And dance music, I think the kick in the dance music is one of the most fundamental items which is in your production, and I think that it's even that important that if your kick isn't the right one, or isn't tuned the right way, or EQ'd, or processed the right way, the rest of your production and making a nice mix and master is going to be very difficult. So what I do myself a lot is to just steal a kick from another track. Let's just be honest about that, because if you have a track which you think sounds great, it's nice to just grab that kick out of it, but it's not always possible. So I want to show you a trick of how you can sample a kick out of almost any track out there. And for this example, I took Hardwell and Armin with this track. Is this sound from the computer loud enough? Yeah, good? Okay. So what I do is find a place where the kick is almost playing on its own, but of course there's a lot of things going on, including a master chain and whatever, so I really need to edit some things. But let's see if we can find a place where the kick is almost playing on its own. So let's see the drop. Oh, it's not the drop. Here we go. Okay, let's see if we can just grab this kick out of the track, because I love the sound of it. I need to make this a little bit bigger. Well, let's take that one. It's almost here, so I can get rid of the rest of the track. So I think it starts here. Well, no, I'm getting rid of the transient here. That's it. So then what I do is copy this 3 times. And this is just a basic trick to get you to get you started within seconds after you start your production. Let me make it a little bit shorter so you can see everything that I'm doing here. Sometimes it's also good to just take a kick from a Vengeance pack or whatever, but I think this is more inspiring because you already know that the kick is good. The only thing is you just need it soloed. So what I do, I take it in 3 parts, and if you look at this waveform, you see the first part until here. This is more or less the first transient. Then what comes after it, more or less, will be the part which is pumping your stomach. And the last part, the tail, is the part that's the sub. So what I'm going to do is to cut these 3 things after the first transient, after the knock in your stomach, and for the sub. Well, oh, where am I? Here we go. The first track I use for the click. The second part I use for the stomach part, and the last one is for the sub. So, if I'm a bit lucky today, sometimes it just needs a little bit more time. I still have the same sound, you don't hear any clicks or whatever, and then the process starts. The only thing that I'm doing with the sub part is take away all the higher frequencies until you don't hear any information from the track anymore. So let's say this works. Now still there's a lot of noise and stuff going on, but that's going to be on this part. So also on this part I'm going to get rid of the higher frequencies until I only hear the stomach part. And the first thing, most of these tracks or producers use a lot of sidechains, so more or less the first half of a second is already isolated. So sometimes I don't need to process the first click because you don't hear any information from the track. So what happens if I play these together? Here we have a clean kick. It might sound a little bit too long, but at least we have a starting point for a kick, which obviously in the end will be totally different because you're gonna add your own stuff, your own synthesizers and processing to it. So it's not, I think it's not so wrong to just steal a kick like that and to have that as a starting point. Well, what I did to just skip some time, I already have that here. And what we have here, and what you hear, is that it's a very long kick. Most probably, it's not only his kick that I've sampled, but only his bass. So, like this, I am really stuck to his key, which is E in this case. So what I want to do now is see if I can have this one working with a bass sound. So I have programmed this one, which is playing E. It's just a simple bass coming from the Nexus, nothing special, but just to give you this example. What I want to do now is use the LFO tool, which I think is a great tool, to see if we can use the LFO tool, or at least a sidechain plugin, to define the length of the kick, so it's not fighting with your bass. So what I'm doing is that I'm going to put that LFO tool on the kick, which is not a very regular thing to do, but for this trick it works really great. And normally this is the length of the kick. And normally a sidechain works like ducking the signal on the kick and then coming up, like this. This is the way you are using it for bass. Now the kick is gone. But you can, on this LFO tool, you can invert the value of the way it's working. So here you have where my mouse is the volume. If I'm going under 0, I'm going to have the working situation of the sidechain plugin the other way around. The benefit of this is that I can exactly place or exactly create space for my bass, because I want to have it right after the kick, which is happening a lot in dance. So despite of the length of the kick or whatever EQing is going on, which makes the kick resonate. So this is the reason why I'm going to work with an LFO tool instead of cutting the waveform. But because if you cut the waveform, you also know how long the kick is. But if you are boosting, let's say, 48 hertz, the EQ, which is on the kick, is also resonating a little bit. I can give a little example of that. Like this, which is 47 hertz, the sub-frequency that you are hearing is not coming from the waveform, it's inside the EQ. So if you would have cut the waveform, and this still is going on, that sub-frequency is going underneath your basses. So using the sidechain could even help if you are having such resonations going on in your kick EQ to kill them. Well, this is far too long, but you would never EQ it like this. Like this, you can just cut it away and only have the sub or the kick playing and make it completely silent, so the bass is going to be soloed as well. Well, like this, I know that there's space for my bass, so most probably I can just put it on without any problem. Like this, there is space for both, and that's it. And this is a way that I always work, because I really need, in terms of time, that the kick is playing here and that there's space for the bass, so they both can have their 100% of energy in this master. Because that's in the end what you're looking for. Every element has to be very clear and very out there. It's, well, that's at least the way I look at it, because I think that loud and energetic loud masters is really the thing that you really need, also to get signed by labels, by the way. Because that's a thing that's really a question which is coming in. I was posting on my Facebook channel something about making new studio videos, which I already did. Well, there's a new video series coming up. And one of the subjects will be how to get signed by a label, because that's really one thing that's really, really, really hard. There's a lot of labels here, but as you can see around yourself, there's also a lot of people with music. So how would it be possible to have a label choose for the right music? Or how can your music stand out if you send it to a label? Well, that's one thing, because it's really hard for a label. If you get like 1,000 demos every week, it's really hard. I'm talking a lot with Tiësto, and sometimes when he has a long flight, he opens up his laptop after 10 hours of flying, and then he has another 500 emails with demos. Well, if you are Tiësto, how would you find that one demo which is good? So most of the time they are just playing 1 or 2 seconds of a track, and if it's really popping out already, it might catch the attention. But if it's not, well, then it's really a headache for guys like him to find the right track, because it can be a nice track which is not sounding great, but he doesn't have the time to help you to make it sound great, so it has to sound great from itself. So that's also the reason why I'm here already for like a few years to talk about mixing and mastering, because in the end, your idea, you know, the song itself is really an important thing, but the way it's translating in an MP3 or WAV or whatever file format, it's in the end, that will cause your deal or no deal. So, that was a side subject, by the way. Here we have this bass thing going on. In my opinion, it would sound good, like this. And I have my own, I made a little class for myself searching for the right EQ plugins, because in a lot of cases I work with guys from abroad, so we do not always have the time to go in my studio, work on the analog SSL desk, because in the end that sounds the best. But sometimes we do have to stay inside the box. And okay, so I was searching for the right plugins. And here I'm going to reveal some of my own personal favorites, which I've spent, I think, weeks to get them sorted, because it was really hard to compare like an EQ with another EQ and then see which is the best. But I have a frequency spectrum from sub-bass to ultra-high, And for every segment of the frequencies, I have a certain EQ, which I use a lot. So sometimes if you see my channel strips, I have like 5 or 6 EQ plugins stacked, because I think in the end that works the best, you know? And to start with the fundament part, well, I'm going to solo the kick for that one more time. Let me see if I can have some more volume here going on. So what I'm going to do for sub, this is the kick. This is my UAD BX sub synth. Really impressive what it does, because we always say we need something underneath the track going on. You know, if we have a high energetic track, there's a lot of space also in the frequency spectrum in only the sub frequencies. And I use this plugin for that, and I sometimes even use it on masters. This is what it does. Well, I'm glad we have this speaker system here, because now you really feel what it does. In my opinion, I was searching, like I said, for weeks for the right plugins. This one is the only that's doing this, that you really have a controlled sub, which is, you know, hitting your stomach at the same time, but still it's not destroying your mix, because I really have a lot of sub going on, and still the signal is not distorted or whatever. So if you need some sub, use this one. Then if it comes to hitting your stomach, which is the kick part, but also like the bass part, to have that really in your face in a way that it's clear what the bass is playing, because that's what also a thing with progressive house. You have your bass playing on different notes. So sometimes it's hard to get the right EQ, because it can happen that you boost like 200 hertz and then the bass is playing and some notes are popping out and others don't. So I have another plugin from UAD for that, and that's the Dangerous Bax EQ. Well, I can just show you with and without, and then you understand, I guess, what it means. Like this, the kick sounds a little bit thin, in my opinion. And with this plugin on, you will have it pumping in your breast. So that in combination, that's the reason why I stack those plugins. For this, I use only for this frequency. The other one I only use for subs. If we have these two combined, without it, it would sound like this. And this happens if you use them both. A comparable result you will not get with any other plugin, I can guarantee that. But now the lower frequencies are leading across the higher frequencies, so we need to go on a little bit. Let's say everything around 300 hertz, which is really the information part of bass guitar, but also on lead synths, is around 300 hertz. And there is something special in this solid state logic channel strip, which is also a gate and a compressor, but I don't use it for like that. It's only the 300 hertz. So I've even saved it as a user default. If I open up the plugin, this setting, which you see here with the black knobs, is already there because of this. In the end, that's the punch that you're looking for. If you use whatever other plugin to boost 300 hertz, this is not the effect that it has. So if you stack this one with this one and this one, you already feel that there's a really fundamental thing going on. But this is the whole fundament for your whole track. But still, the lower frequencies are the boss above the higher frequencies. So let's see what we have more. Going a little bit up, you have the SSO is for like 300 hertz. You go to 500 hertz. That's really where the lower part of voices are, the information of melodies with synths and all that kind of stuff, it's in the range of 500 hertz. I see a lot of guys using a lot of high frequencies to make a lead sound as clear as it can be, but I don't believe in that. It's a lower segment where you need to do that. And that's the 500 hertz part. Let's see what it does. This part, in the end, in your master, is such an important thing, because a kick is nice if you feel it, but also you want to hear it. But without adding whatever extra top layers of the kick or whatever, you can just boost it with this plugin, which is the Neve ADR RS Legacy. There's also a Neve ADR RS without the Legacy. It's not the same. It's really this one, which is having this effect. But it works on vocals. You know, if sometimes you have the a vocal which is in your mix and you don't think it's clear enough, take this plugin, boost around 500 hertz, and you have it right in your face. Also happens with the kick in this case. I also use the same plugin to go around 3000 hertz, because that's the part, you know, where the higher frequencies are. That's where the note information is coming from on vocals or whatever, but also on the higher elements of the top kick in this case. And it has a very clear but very rough way of boosting the around 3000 hertz part, and this is what happens then. So this in combination with this, so let's say this is the key element of the kick without the lower frequencies. So let's leave that for a bit. And then you have the ultra high frequencies. I use in the Waves bundle the PukeTech EQ P1AS for that. And that's really the top end. This is the part that I use for vocals, but also lead synths, to have it as bright as possible. So let's see what it does. This is really the top level of the frequency spectrum. So if we have this stack going on with all the certain EQs for all the certain parts of the frequency spectrum, this is when you're not processing it. And this is when you are processing it. I think in this case now, but I'm not sure about the sound system here, but might be the sub-frequencies too loud. But at least there is a very stable, fundament underneath your production going on now. So this is my example of how to take a track, how to take a kick from a track to process that in your own way. And one of the things is that there's so much processing going on in this kick, because I already took it from a master, which is mastered, and so processing. And also my 5 EQs, which are going on there. One thing that would help, that if you are thinking in terms of routing your track, this is the part that only goes to your final limiter, if you understand what I mean. Sometimes you just have like 100 tracks, and then you have one stereo out where you do your mastering, which is a nice idea. But what I would recommend, if you want to keep this punch and this fundament, you shouldn't have the kick going through your master channel, which means that if you have 100 tracks, let's say 99 tracks go to a bus. On that bus you do your mastering. This kick is not going to that same bus, it's going straight to the output of the DAW or whatever. So there's no extra compression or limiting going on. What we always say in the studio is let that kick go straight to the people without any processing going on. So having that said, we have this LFO tool going on with the inverted settings. So I'm sure that the length of the kick is not too long. To remind you of what the kick was like, this was the kick, including the bass of, in this case, Hardwell and Armin's track. Like this, I got rid of the bass. And so there's space for my own bass, which I already showed you. Still sounds clean as fuck. That's what we need. this is able to process very loud. But then the next question will be, what happens if we change the notes? Because it's literally a bit simple to have a kick playing in E and a bass playing in E. But what happens if the kick plays in E and the bass is playing in G because there is a chord progression going on? Well, what I do in progressive house tracks, I divide the notes that the kick is playing over different channels. So what you see here with the selected track, it says E, which means the bass is playing in E. The track underneath it, it's exactly the same bass, the same nexus in this case, but it's playing a G. So this is what happens then. And you can imagine that if you have more chords, that you actually in the end need more tracks. And I give every track its own processing. In this case, it means that I'm going to search for the same energy on all the notes. This is my very simple EQ on the E note. But to have that same energy, I have to add some subs there because the note is higher, less subs, so I need to boost some subs. What a lot of people are doing, if you take this from the same synth, playing all those notes, you have one key which is sounding the best, and then if the note is changing, you lose your bass energy, or it has too much bass energy if it goes lower, because that happens if you, in the end, play a D, which is lower than the E. Last note has too much sub, so in that case I would get rid of that sub frequencies. And you just have to tweak this a little bit around until you are at the point where all those different notes are having the same energy. Then there is another thing. Of course, there is a lot of reverberation going on. What I like in my own productions is that the stereo image is as wide as I can have it. Later in the track, which I'm going to talk a little bit about the mastering of the Tiësto track, I will show you around what happens if you make it wide. And of course, there's that question about phase problems, because that happens if you put a stereo imager on the master chain or whatever. But there's a solution to that, but that comes a little bit later. One of the things is reverb. The reason why you use reverb is, of course, because of the effect of it, but also to create space in your mix. I have a little example here. I don't say that it's a hit, but let's say that this is your track. What we have here is a little synth coming from the Nexus, nothing special. Here again we have that EQ of the SSL channel strip going on. Just to give you an example how that 300 Hertz thing will sound on a lead sound. In my opinion, that's where the information of this sound is like. You know, if you are sometimes boosting those 300 and with the Neve, the 500 Hertz things, if you would bypass that, you will feel that the sound goes way deeper in your mix. And if you are boosting these frequencies with these EQs, it's still in your face. But that was to just give that example. One thing that you are hearing here is that I'm going to a bus, which is bus number 10, which I called the triggered reverb. And why is it the triggered reverb? I think that you can decide to just put a reverb on the channel. Let's just get rid of the bass and the kick for a while. Well, to avoid any misunderstandings, what I do is do not use the reverb coming from the Nexus unless it gives you the right effect in this case. So I start with a dry signal, then I put on the reverb, and then I know that there are a lot of people who are just leaving it like this. But I think that reverb, you should handle a reverb as if it's in a synthesizer, like processing. So one thing that I always do, if you just listen to the reverb, if you just put it on, This is only the reverb, and what you hear, if you just put on an equalizer, there's a lot of sub-frequencies going on. This kind of frequencies are really destroying your final mix and master. Of course, there's a way of saying, okay, let's just get rid of those frequencies. This is what I see a lot. Nice, but still, also there's a lot of high frequencies going on, and if you are using a lot of reverb, which is what I'm doing, there's also a lot of noise shit going on, which is also destroying your mix. So what I do, if I have my melody, which is in this case something very simple, I copy that melody to a trigger, which in this case, or in my case always, is the Klopgeist from Logic, which is just a simple transient thing. Not to use it, but only to use it as a trigger. So we have this channel. I'm going to cut it away from the main output, so there's no output. The only thing what it's doing is triggering a compressor, which is compressing the signal before it goes into a reverb. And that works like this. For this case, I just use a lexicon, whatever. This works on every reverb plugin. Basically, this is one of my favorites. But, well, like I said, if you just go in, it would sound, if you just listen to the reverb on solo, this is what happens with the sub-frequencies, etc. Well, on this channel strip, you see I start with a compressor. And that compressor, on the right upper corner, you see it's sidechained to instrument number 5. But the instrument number 5 in this case was the Klopgeist. Can be whatever, cowbell or whatever. But it needs to be the same timing, but then a short transient as your main melody. So as you can see, all the time when it's gain reducing, it's triggered by that trigger, of course. So you see that it's going on the same rhythm as the melody. But the most beneficial part of it comes now. If you just listen to the reverb, which it's doing now, we have this long subtail going on. Now I'm going to unbypass this compressor. Still there is some, so you can use the EQ to get rid of the lower part. But one other thing, and I hope you can hear that on this sound system, is that the lead sound comes back in the reverb. So it's not only but it gives the tone of the instrument you're putting in. Just listen one more time. Now you hear that the lead sound is really far away. And now it comes back in. The difference this is just a small difference, but I promise to go in depth. If you listen to this in combination with the lead sound, like this, the reverb is not really doing something. There's noise in the background. And if you unbias that, the reverb is creating space without any side effects you don't want. So let's go one more time. So that's one thing to handle your reverb, to have a clear tail after your lead sound. This is also something you can do with vocals or whatever, but it works the best on lead sounds. Then if you want to have a really wide sound, you can just say, I want to have more of the reverb, but you can also say, I'm going to delay the reverb first. And there are a few ways of doing that. First of all, you see in the channel strip we have this compression thing going on. But you can also have the compressed signal go through a delay plugin first before going into the reverb. So what happens then is that the dry signal comes first, and then after that, the reverb is triggered. So both of them can be at a very high level in your final master. And if you are putting a loud lead synth and a loud reverb, it's taking way too much space. So this is a way of having a wide sound with less reverb, but then you have to do something, and that's working with a delay in this case. If you listen, it's getting triggered a few times, and this works the best with a delay, which is like a ping-pong delay or whatever. So what happens is that there's a lead sound in the middle. Then after a while, it gets triggered on the left side. That triggers a reverb. And then after another while, it's triggering on the right side, the same reverb. So you get that the reverb is not really happening in the middle, it's only happening on the sides. So you have your space in the middle for your lead sound and your space for the reverbs on the sides. As you see, I'm doing that with really a low amount of delay, because otherwise it's just getting a mess. If you would delay it too much, this is more or less what's happening then. No, well, this gives the example of what's happening in the end. That's nice, but you know, you want to have it right after it. So just think of it as the lead sound has to be dry, totally dry, and then the reverb comes after it in a little bit of a delay thing. Well, when it comes to stereo image, I believe the whole vision behind this is that normally you would have your speakers here, but in terms of visualization, your mix, what happens if you would have your not have your speakers here, but put it here? Well, in my fantasy, then I have more space in my stereo image. So basically, that's what I do when I start my mixing. The first thing is that what I do is put a stereo imaging plugin on my master. And this is the point that if you would go to whatever education, whatever, they would say, no, you cannot do that. You have phase problems going on. And I think making a great mix is all about breaking rules. So that's what we did in the John Christian and Tiësto track, which I'm going to load now. It's Scream. We tried to work together inside the studio and outside the studio to make EDM music, which a lot of labels think that it's not doable anymore, but I think we proved that EDM music is still more alive than ever, because we are just passing like 5 million streams on Spotify, I think, this weekend with this track. So if anyone tells you EDM is dead, don't believe them. This is the track. I'm just going to play you a little bit. Let's hope it works properly. Does anyone know this track? Oh wow, so like 10 of the 5 million streams are coming from you. That's nice. Etc. Well, actually, normally I would like to do a mix and mastering with analog gear and stuff, but because this is a collaboration track between me and Tiësto, we weren't in the situation to do that. So we had to do a mix down in the box, because he was constantly playing it already, giving feedback, and if you need to go back and forth with feedback, it's really a mess to do that on analog gear. So we decided to keep it inside the box. But the benefit is that I can just show you the project as it really was. And if I go to my master channel, you see a lot of, you see a lot of processing going on. And the first thing that I just do is two things. I have this SPL Vitalizer, which is already on my master channel and not bypassed, when I just starting to search for a kick or whatever. And the only thing that it does is happening here. It says stereo expander, which is basically something to open up your stereo image based on some phase trick. Well, if you do that, if your mix is already done, you will hear that the whole balance of the mix is already gone. One other plugin which is already opened when I start doing the mix and mastering is the imager. So here's also about breaking another rule, because stacking stereo imagers is something that people would say, don't go there, you only will have phase problems. Okay, well, I don't believe that, but, well, I do believe that, but if you do it the right way, you will not have those phase problems. Because what is the phase problem all about? The whole track has to be mono compatible. What you want is that if you are in a club or festival where they play your track in mono, and what is mono based on a stereo track, left signal plus right signal minus 20 dB, that's the conversion between a stereo track and a mono track. But if you say left signal plus right signal, if they are out of phase, you will have that if you would make it mono, that there are some frequencies cancelling out each other. But there's a trick. If you have the need, if you feel the need to have such a wide stereo image, like I do, I want to have those speakers further from each other, so I have the space to put in a lot of things, a lot of information. If you would put this on right from the start, making the mix should happen in mono. So, in my mind, I know it's going to be ultimate wide, but during making the balance between my layers, making the balance between kick and bass, between all the balances out there, what I do is listen to the track in mono. This is what happens. Exactly, nothing happens. And that's the trick. If you listen to the track in mono while making those balances, you are going to search for a way that everything sounds as clear as possible. Then you have that surprise going on, that if you are satisfied with this, so my bass is clear, my kick is clear, my leads are clear, like this. At the moment we are listening at a completely mono thing. If I'm going to bypass this plugin, the surprise comes that the track sounds really big. But still, if this track would be played on a festival where they play mono, this is still the main elements which are there. And although people are saying that you cannot use those stereo imagers on a master, I even use two, but if you work like this, it will be none of a problem. So this is what happens if you then bypass the plugin. It's going to open up. But still there is, you know, if you play it in stereo or if you play it in mono, the basic information is the same. So that's the key trick to, you know, if you want to search for a way to check if your vocals are loud enough or your lead sound is mixed well or whatever, just put your track in mono and then you will hear a clear balance. If it sounds right in mono, I can guarantee you that the stereo version sounds right as well, and you have the right translation between a situation where they play mono or where they play stereo. So I see my time is more or less up, but we have a few extra minutes, so if you want to ask some questions or whatever, just let me know.
Yes, guys, you can just put up your hands, and we have a little bit of time for questions. So, this is working, yes, and I'll come to you. I see the first question over there.
Also, before people are going away, can we do one thing for our socials? Because I want to have some enthusiastic pictures. So I'm going to make a selfie with you in the background. But I want to see some hands. Is that possible? Yeah. Woo! Thanks a lot.
Hi, John. Do you have any tricks?
Where are you? Where's the microphone? Oh, sorry.
John, do you have any tricks for mid-side, how you EQ it, or some things you can make your mix more better? Because it's always like a struggling, I get phase problems, or it's felt like my whole mix is falling down.
There is one great EQ for that, and if you see, I do a lot of mid-side stuff on my masters as well, but you can handle that the same way on lead synths or even your kick or whatever. You just have to listen to your sound very carefully to see what goal you are trying to achieve with that. And more or less, for me, it also goes about stereo imaging, but sometimes if there's a lot of stereo imaging going on, I want to have something which is really popping in my face. So for that, I use the Pro Q, which is very easy because, you know, if I'm boosting this frequency spectrum, I can just have it split. And now we have two buttons. One says S for stereo, the other one is mono. And that's basically what it is. So imagine yourself that normally you have two channels. With mid-side EQ, you have three channels, which makes left, right, and center. And sometimes it's just good to only handle the center part to get something more in your face, or just to put it a little bit away. And that's, you know, that's the thing. But I don't. It creates a little bit of phase issues. But still, if you are doing this in a mono, you will not have those phase problems because then you are, you know, processing it until you are satisfied. Yeah, well, I do it everywhere. Also, sometimes on, if I have a reverb, I cut out the middle channel of the reverb. So I only have it on the sides to just have a bigger sound or so. So you can just be creative with that. Cool.
All right, second question. Anyone? Yeah, over there. I'll head to you.
When I saw this masterclass coming up, I had one question in my mind already, and that is, how do you get your tracks this loud?
This loud?
Yes, people are really struggling with getting the loudest in the mix, especially this genre. It's all about loudness.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how do you implement the loudness factor in your tracks?
Well, basically, if you have, you need to create space for every element. And those elements just need to be that element. That's the reason why if you are putting a hi-hat, cut out sub-frequencies. Because in some samples, you have those sub-frequencies going on, but you do not always hear them. So it's really like the low and the high cut thing on every channel has to be correct. So you isolate the important frequencies which are going on. That's the first thing. The other thing is that one of the tricks that we have in this stereo imaging thing is that a track which is very wide easier gets louder than a track which is almost mono. So that's also a benefit of having this wide stereo imaging thing going on. And apart from that, the whole sidechain thing on kick and bass, which I started with, is one thing that has to be done the right way. But also the reverb thing with the triggered reverb, so you got rid of the lower frequencies, which you not always hear, but they are around. So what I tried to say with that is that every channel has to be as clean as possible, and then you just simply have more space for every channel. And sometimes it just needs one limiter to get it done, because this track with Tiësto is -5 dB RMS, which is very, very loud, and the only thing which is going on is this max volume thing. So the loudness comes from the mix in this case.
All right, third question. Yes, over here.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Back to the reverb, is it a special reason why you put in the compressor before the reverb, or
yes,
you can put the compressor after the reverb?
Yeah, the difference is that I want to affect the signal which is triggering the reverb. If you put the compressor after the reverb, it's going to process the reverb itself, but that's not the idea. The idea is to clean up the signal that you are going to put in the reverb, so the reverb responds in a different way than if you are not doing that.
Okay. Second question is, which metering do you use in your master chain?
Which what?
Which metering?
Metering?
Yeah.
The Nugen meter.
Ah, okay.
This is really a great thing. It really gives you a nice vision on what's going on with the level.
Yeah.
Here you can see that the average level of the Tiësto track is -4.6, so it's even louder than -5, and it's clean.
It's at RMS or?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Cool, thanks.
Cool.
All right, thank you. Great question. Yes, over here.
Hey, how's it going, John?
Very
First
good.
of all, thank you so much for showing us these awesome tricks. I got tons of it already
Cool,
from that.
thanks, man.
I had a question about the monoing when you said, do you always keep it in mono or do you turn it on and off every time you're mixing?
Yeah, of course. I have to check what's going on in stereo, but basically to get used to a mono sound, which is annoying also a little bit, I just have to, to keep on doing it, because after a while you are used to what it sounds like, and once you are used to, then you can let it work in your benefit.
For separate channels, when you're working on the mix down, how much do you process each individual channel, and how do you know when to process or when not to process? Because I feel like I have the difficulties of knowing, all right, this sounds good, but I don't know if I should push it further with processing.
Yeah, well, if you see what's going on here, these are the separate checks, the separate channels. You can see that there's not really that much processing going on, because basically making the right mix already start by choosing the right sounds. And so I spend more time tweaking inside synthesizers or keep on changing kicks until I have an effect, instead of taking a kick, put on my 5 EQs, which is a basic thing for me, but also limiting almost mastering a single channel. For me, that doesn't work, because basically I'm not that much a fan of digital processing, because I really love the analog stuff. So it's always some kind of concession to process. I think that if you are using a lot of plugins, the sound gets worse. So that's the reason why I'm not using that much. Here you see there's a whole bunch of tracks which only has EQ, and some are not even EQ'd.
Would you consider, like, if you do want to fatten a sound up, that does sound good, saturation maybe for that?
Yeah,
like
saturation
maybe
is
a
great.
Soundtoys decapitator or something, or
Yeah,
trash?
well, that's something which I didn't use in this project, but what I do a lot is, if you want to have something limited, instead of using a limiter, I use an overdrive, because that has the same effect on the dynamics of a track. But the effect is different, because you get more energy instead of having it ducked away with a limiter. So instead of limiting, use an overdrive. That's a cool thing.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Cool.
All right, we have time for 2 last questions. Yeah.
Hi. I always find it very difficult to... I make vocal trance, and
Yeah.
The kick and the vocal are always fighting for attention, and I want to get them out of each other's hair, but then the kick doesn't sound good. Do you have any advice on how to do that?
Yeah, of course. Well, there are a few tricks which you can do. What I think which is nice, if you are having a track, a vocal track, just copy the vocal track 3 times, and then make a stereo image, so you have your left, mid, and right channel. And then in terms of stereo image, you have to decide on which part of the stereo image, who is the boss. So then I would say, in the mono part of your stereo image, your kick should be the boss, which means that on the vocal channel you have, which is panned to the middle, you could easily use a sidechain plugin to have it ducked away when the kick is playing. Because of the vocal tracks you have on the side, still the information of the vocalist is going on. So the fight which you are talking about then only is happening in the middle, but the sides are still going on. That's an ideal track to have them both in your face.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
All right, 1 last question. I think you were first.
Well, it's not like a question, more a request. I know you did some YouTube movies, but would you consider a more broad digital course in the future?
Yeah.
Because that is something I would really appreciate. But I've seen you a couple of times now, and every time you amaze me with your knowledge, and I would really appreciate it, and even pay a lot for it.
Well, first of all, that's not necessary, because
Okay.
I think I already, I strongly believe that sharing is also caring. I really live a life nice for music, so I would like to give something back to the scene. That's the reason why I'm here. I'm not getting paid for this as well. I just want to share some knowledge, because I really would like for people to become better, you know. But the only thing is that you need some people around you that are telling you those tricks. And the reason why I know these tricks is I also got people in the past that were telling me tricks, and I made my own thing with that in the end. But there are actually 2 video series coming up. One is coming from my own studio, doing all this kind of tips and tricks on video. And the other one is that I go to other studios, like Nicky Romero already confirmed, Laidback Luke, the really nice profiles, to go into their studio and to see what they are doing and to talk a little bit on this level with those kind of guys. What I really hope for is that we sometimes end up in a discussion where I was saying, yes, you can do that, and the other one is saying, no, you cannot. And then try to explain that so others who are watching it can learn from that.
Yeah, because the truth is in the middle somewhere.
But, yeah, well, it's all about trusting your own ears, you know, and there's always that question, which is, when do you know your track is finally mastered? You don't. There's not a meter or a person or whatever who is telling you, okay, well, you can bounce the track now because it's done. It's your inner feeling. So that's something that you have to develop as well. And then after you have developed it, you need to learn to trust it.